Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series and co-author of the Parable Port series, and we need to talk spoilers about Frankenturkey 2. I wasn't going to do a spoiler review, and normally I don't do spoiler reviews for books that aren't new, but I feel like I just have to talk about this book. We have to talk about this thing in depth. So you are warned, this will be a spoiler-filled review of this book, Frankenturkey 2. If you want my non-spoiler thoughts, go check out the non-spoiler review. It's out now, so you can go watch that if you don't want to be spoiled. Or if you just want to know my ranking of this book, go check that out. As far as this review goes, we're talking spoilers. All the things, because I really want to discuss this. So here we go. You've been fully warned. Turn back now if you don't want spoilers. Otherwise, don't come at me in the comments with, you spoiled the book. That's what this video is about. So, Frankenturkey 2 by Betsy Haynes, book number 7 in the Bone Chiller series. Let's talk about it. So at the end of Frankenturkey, you have a situation where that was so ridiculous. Also, I guess spoilers for Frankenturkey, the first book. At the end of Frankenturkey, you have this ridiculous scene where Frankenturkey is chasing the kids through the woods. They get back to the garage. When they're in the garage, the lightning strikes the same place twice, strikes the turkey, Frankenturkey, because I guess it does make sense. He's got all these metal hangers in him and stuff, so it makes sense that he'd be kind of like a lightning rod. So he gets struck by the lightning, but all the hangers and goofy masks and all the things all go away, and all that's left is a perfectly roasted Thanksgiving turkey. And so the family eats said Thanksgiving turkey with the Will Banks family. Jake, the bully from the first book, his whole family comes over to Annie and Kyle's house, and they all have Thanksgiving turkey together. And they eat Frankenturkey at the end of book 1, it's implied. Now, at the beginning of book 2, Annie and Kyle, I liked that this book really kicked things off a lot faster because Annie and Kyle find the wishbone from Frankenturkey from the previous year. Why they put it in the toy box, I do not know. I think that's absolutely disgusting personally, but it's in the toy box. They get the wishbone out, and their dad tells them about, oh, wishbones are like magic. If you break the wishbone, both of you hold one end of it, you pull, whoever has the bigger piece will have their wish granted. So Annie wishes that Gobbledygook would come back to life because, yes, this book starts off where Gobbledygook the turkey has been run over by a truck. And I thought, what on earth? This is how we're starting this book off? That should have been a sign of things to come, because it certainly was. And so Annie wishes that Gobbledygook were still alive. Kyle, meanwhile, wishes that his best friend Jake would come over so he'd have someone smart to talk to. Now, I definitely thought with the wish being someone smart to talk to, that there would be something that would happen with that, but nothing happened with that. It was just a throwaway line. So the wish, when they pull on that wishbone, it breaks clean in half. And so both of them get their wish granted. Jake shows up right then, and they're kind of like, oh, what a coincidence. But Gobbledygook appears in the pen outside. And here's where things get nasty. Because when Annie in the middle of the night goes out to see Gobbledygook, she realizes it's like a zombie Gobbledygook. His skin is falling apart. It talks about there's a string of bloody skin left to attach the wing. And I thought, that's so gross. There's pus and ooze and warts and it was so disgusting the way Betsy Haynes described it. I thought, no, I don't like this. I don't like it at all. And so then Kyle comes out too, and they're both kind of like, what in the world? What's going on here? And so they soon realize they need to keep Gobbledygook a secret, because what will they do to explain to their parents? So they decide to take Gobbledygook to the cave where they had kept him before in the first book and where Frankenturkey had attacked them. So they decide to give Gobbledygook some feed, and when they come back to check on Gobbledygook, he's looking a lot better than he did before. And in the middle of the night, Annie has a dream And she has this dream that Gobbledygook is calling out to her and pointing at his chest and saying there's something missing, and it's the wishbone. So she goes in the dream and gets the wishbone, puts it back together, takes it out to the cave, and it like magically infuses into Gobbledygook's body. Now remember, that's the Frankenturkey wishbone, not the Gobbledygook wishbone. So how the wishbone infuses over the other wishbone, I have no idea, but it does. And so soon Annie starts to realize that any wishes made around Gobbledygook come true. And someone wishes that the dog would act like a cat around the turkey, and all of a sudden their dog Trouble starts acting like a cat. They make some other wishes. Annie makes a wish that her mom would not talk about eating Gobbledygook for Thanksgiving dinner, and so that wish comes true. And so Annie's starting to piece it together like, wait a minute, these wishes are coming true, what's happening? And then the horrifying twist that comes about halfway through-ish the book, where Annie's out by Gobbledygook, who she thinks is Gobbledygook, but it's Gobbledygook's body possessed by Frankenturkey's ghost because of the wishbone. And apparently at this point, we find out that Frankenturkey has enough power to actually make people make wishes. And I thought that was actually super terrifying. And before Annie can stop herself, she wishes that they would eat Kyle for Thanksgiving dinner instead of Frankenturkey. And she is realizing, like, I don't even know how I said this. Like, why did this come out of my mouth? And she realizes that this is not Gobbledygook. It's Frankenturkey taking his revenge. And at that point is where I thought this is getting even more disgusting and a little Twilight Zone-y, because Kyle starts to overeat. He's just eating and eating and eating and getting like stuffed up. Like he's getting fatter and fatter and fatter from overeating and overeating and overeating. And soon he is like out of control from eating, and he's just not stopping. And Annie knows that this is happening. The parents are all excited about it, and the parents are talking about eating their son for Thanksgiving dinner. And I thought, that is absolutely horrifying. And so it's up to Annie to try and save the day and figure out what she's going to do to stop this, because she goes to get Jake and she realizes that if they get too close to Frankenturkey, Frankenturkey's going to make them wish for things. And one of my favorite sequences of the book is where they convince Frankenturkey that they're kind of like on his side and that they don't want Frankenturkey to be eaten for Thanksgiving dinner. So they like lure him out to the cave, and then Jake pushes the rocks over the front of the cave. Rocks fall in front of the cave, but then this sequence where they think they've done it, but then Jake is trying not to say a wish out loud. And it's like choking and like trying to hold his hand over his mouth, trying not to say like, I wish Frankenturkey wasn't in the cave. And I loved that sequence. I was like, this is so terrifying and so horrifying and such a great idea for this book. I just kept thinking, this is so clever to take this idea of Frankenturkey, which in the first book is really just like this silly monster movie kind of idea, and elevate it in a way that takes it to a new level with lore, where now you have this wishbone idea, which is like a thing a lot of people talk about, like wishbones. So it's not even like a stretch that this would be like kind of an idea that you could have in a book like this. And so the fact that Betsy Haynes adds this element in, this wishbone idea and these wishes, and then Frankenturkey kind of like forcing people to make wishes, I thought was so excellent. And the climax of the book was so scary, where they're going to be, literally they have the axe. They're going to get Kyle, I will just say for the sake of the YouTubes, and they're going to get him, and Jake is the one who's kind of like been wished to do it. He's under Frankenturkey's spell, and only Annie is not under the spell of Frankenturkey. And so because Annie's not under the spell of Frankenturkey, she calls out to Gobbledygook, because she knows that Gobbledygook is in there somewhere, and she asks Gobbledygook to help save them. And Gobbledygook starts to fight back against Frankenturkey, and finally they do defeat Frankenturkey for good. And I loved it so much. I was like, this would normally probably make me a little like, huh? Like, I thought about this one compared to The Haunting House in the Shivers series, because some people might say, well, that book is like the same kind of ending as this. But in that book, you did not have the setup between the main characters and the house character, where there's like this like idea forming of these two are like close, you know, between the main characters and the house. In this, Gobbledygook was like their very good pet that loved them. They loved Gobbledygook. So it's so already built into the fabric of the storyline that this is a thing, that Frankenturkey really hates them. Gobbledygook loves them. And there's that part at the end where Jake has the axe and Frankenturkey is standing next to him and like smiling evilly at Annie. And I just thought, that is so horrifying. And I can't believe I'm totally bought into this whole storyline. But then when Annie calls out to Gobbledygook, that was such a great moment. They break the spell of Frankenturkey. I just really, really enjoyed it. I feel like the characters, Annie's journey here of feeling so helpless and not sure what she can do, and the fact that she is the youngest kid in the family, and how I feel like sometimes youngest kids in a family do feel a little helpless sometimes. You know, they're youngest, they're kind of the smallest usually when they're a little kid, and so they kind of sometimes feel a little helpless, and like everyone else is making these choices, but I don't have any agency. And Annie is the one who takes it upon herself to save her family and to save her brother, to save her parents, because Frankenturkey also makes Jake wish that whoever eats Kyle for Thanksgiving dinner will choke and die. And I thought, wow, that is so evil, so just absolutely terrifying. Like, I feel like Frankenturkey is such a good villain for this series. I really admire this book from the setup of the story. I feel like it's well written. There are some really great lines in here. Like, some of the descriptions, like I said, were so disgusting and over the top. And I just thought, oh, that is awful. Like, so awful. And I just was here for it. This book really surprised me, I'm not gonna lie. I did not know what to think going into it. I kind of thought, oh, this is gonna be so stupid. Another Frankenturkey book. And then I was so surprised. I actually really enjoyed this one. Like, I would probably reread this book. That's how much I liked it, because of the emotional journey and how it made me feel, like how helpless I felt as a reader, thinking, what are they gonna do? There's no way to get out of this. And the fact that it wasn't a deus ex machina, or like a character comes in to save the day last second who's not in the story at all, but the fact that it's Gobbledygook, who's been there all along and has built up this relationship with Annie as like this pet and pet owner, it just was so perfect. I really, really enjoyed this book. I will say, all that said though, I do think it's a little intense for middle grade readers. I feel like this has some really intense things. And like I said in my non-spoiler review, I feel like there are some implications here that are very creepy and very disgusting and not normally in a middle grade book. Like, even in the Shivers book, Who's Coming to Dinner, which is about a similar kind of idea, like who are they going to eat for Thanksgiving kind of thing. Like, that one did not seem as disturbing as this one did. Mainly because there's the axe scene later on in the book where you are just sitting there waiting and like wondering, what are they going to do? Like, how are they getting out of this? Like, you've definitely put all the characters into this perfect situation. And it also reminded me, that was the other thing I was going to mention, it reminded me of Harry Potter. Now, okay, some spoilers, I guess, for Harry Potter if you haven't read Harry Potter or seen the movies. But the fact that Harry Potter couldn't be killed by Voldemort because of his mother's love, that was a similar thing, in my opinion, in this book, where because of Gobbledygook's love for Annie, she could not fall under the spell of Frankenturkey. And I just was like, this is such great, like, packaging, like such a great story. I just really enjoyed it. To some people, this might be so dumb, and you might think like, wow, this is really stupid. But to me, I love these kind of stories where there's a climax that's building. You get to this moment where everything seems hopeless and helpless, but then there's this one little kernel, this one little seed of hope, and that's what the heroes latch onto and are able to push forward with, which Annie is the hero. She's the one who saves the day. If it wasn't for her, this would not have ended the way it did. It would not have ended with the villains being defeated. Frankenturkey, the only villain, but still. It would not have ended like that. So I really like this book. I'd be so curious to know, what did you think about this book? What do you think about some of the themes? What do you think about the ideas in it? I would be so curious to know. If you haven't read any Bone Chillers books, suffer through Frankenturkey. It's ridiculous. You'll laugh, all those things, just so you can read Frankenturkey too, because I really enjoyed it. But if you're watching this, don't watch this unless you've read, never mind. I know how y'all are. It's fine. I don't care. We're all here to have fun and read books. So that is my spoiler review of Frankenturkey 2. He's back. So until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.